Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to the bustling ports of the Red Sea to live a day in the life of an Aksumite trader. Picture yourself navigating the power of the monsoon winds, loading ships with ivory, incense, and spices, and striking quiet but crucial deals that linked Africa, Arabia, and India. The Aksumite kingdom wasn't just powerful, it was a global hub, where fortunes were made and cultures collided. If you've ever wondered how trade shaped empires long before modern globalization, this is the story you can't miss. Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below, telling us where you're watching from. Let's set sail together into history's hidden trade routes. The mat warms slowly beneath your shoulder as the first pale stripe of morning slides across it, and you blink at the ceiling reed by reed until the pattern becomes familiar again. A cool breath moves in through the doorway, salt and dawn and something faintly sweet, and you let it fill your chest like the tide slipping into a quiet cove. Wooden hulls complain to each other in the harbor, a chorus of sleepy creaks, and the ropes answer with their soft rasp against bollards, as if the whole port is doing its morning stretches. You smile into the weave of your pillow, decide that stretching can wait, and then stretch anyway. The day is polite. You should be too. You sit up, palm to the mat, and the world settles into place. The little cup by the lamp with last night's cooled tea, the ledger roll tucked beneath the basket, your sandals waiting like patient animals. Outside, a camel snorts, one of the tall, moody ones who think they own the road, and a thin ribbon of spice floats in, something peppery, something resinous, and a note of old leather. You rub your eyes and taste the morning already, dry and bright on your tongue, as if the sun has sprinkled a pinch of salt there to say hello. The door rushes open to the soft blue before sunrise. You step through and the cool air climbs your arms. The sky has not committed to a color yet. It glows the way a seashell glows when you hold it to your ear and pretend the ocean is inside it. Well, here the ocean is not pretending. The Red Sea extends before you like a long, patient street, and Agilis sits right at its curb, neither the first house nor the last, but a very convenient one. To one side, far up and away, is the way to Egypt and beyond. To the other, the gate of Bab el-Mandeb, and the open step down into the Indian Ocean. You don't need charts to understand why this matters. The sea is a hallway, and your doorway opens into it. You walk toward the light, sandals whispering over dust as a cool gull shadow slides across your feet. The harbor wakes in gentle pieces. A boy with a bundle of lutes stops to pluck a sleepy string and grins when the note hangs longer than it deserves. A pair of stevedores share a joke, both too tired to laugh, and the sound comes out like two oars dipping at the same time. Ships bob and press at their moorings, some with sewn planks, some with pegged ones breathing on the swell. Their masts sketch thin lines across the brightening sky. The ropes tighten, loosen, and sing little songs about the day's work. You tilt your head and listen to the old harbor rhythm you've known since you were new to your sea legs. Creak, hush, rasp, gull, hush, creak. Agilis is not just water and wooden bones. Behind you, inland, the highlands wade cool mornings, terraced fields, the city of Aksum perched like a wise elder on the hills. The road from the sea to the uplands is a thread, and you spend your life walking it back and forth in one way or another. From that upland world come people and goods and stories. Gold dust winking in little leather pouches, ivory veined like quiet lightning, hides smelling of smoke and sun. To the harbor arrive strangers who become less strange over bread and time. Merchants from Arabia with jars of fragrant resin. Sailors from farther coasts with cotton and beads and pepper that makes your nose itch in the best way. You don't explain all this to yourself. You breathe it. The port shows you how the world shakes hands every morning. You pass a baker's doorway where heat tumbles out like a domestic lion, and you stop because of course you stop. A round of flatbread rides a wooden paddle, high as a moon, and slides down into waiting cloth with a soft thump. The baker's daughter shoulders past you with a basket and a grin that says, "You always stand in the exact place where the basket needs to be." You accept the correction, offer a coin, and trade for a bread still warm enough to fog your fingers. A date joins it, sticky and sunsweet, and you pull off a bite that satisfies some very ancient craving. There, now you are officially awake, Dot at the corner where the dock gossip collects like leaves against a fence. The talk is already busy, though no one has quite decided to work yet. A harbour master leans on his ledger and says a name you know. A ropeman swears a new knot will save lives. Everyone nods, because why not, and no one will change a single knot. A fisherman describes a nightlight in the water that followed his boat like a curious spirit. You know it's small creatures glowing when disturbed. He does too, but spirits make better conversation at this hour. You listen the way a net listens. Open, easy, letting a few things catch. Work will be ready soon. The talk is just as important. It softens the day. You head back to your small room by the quay and coax the lamp to life. Its light is gold and respectful. You set the bread, the dates, and your cup, and then unroll your ledger with the care you might give a sleeping cat. Numbers calm you, not because they are stern, but because they are small promises. This much ivory expected, this much cloth owed, this many jars of resin to be weighed with the honest stones. Your weights are smooth from many hands, and you like to warm them between your palms before setting them down. You add a little line to the margin. Sailor's tale of green light, task for proof. Next time, bring a jar. You chuckle. Imagine bottling the sea's glow and selling it to temple keepers. The label would have to whisper in the dark. The lamp hums faintly, and the ink flows like obedient water. You mark a note to check the lashings along the starboard side yesterday. A teasing strand had started to fray. You write down the name of a new buyer who smells of cardamom and confidence. You draw a small wave to remind yourself to ask the pilot about the first good weather window. You wonder, as the nib pauses, how far will the monsoon carry you this season? Far enough to bring new words onto the deck, new prices into your hand, new stories into the quiet spaces between night and wind. The question feels like a horizon inside your chest. You blow the ink dry and step out again. The air is brighter now, the sun climbing up the masts, stringing thin medals of light along the rigging. A ship's cook bangs a pot with a wooden spoon, and the present crew pretends this is a sophisticated bell. A boy leads the camels toward the loading yard, both animals chewing with such seriousness that you feel a little underdressed for breakfast. The camels carry sacks that breathe out a whisper of musk and spice every time they shift. People politely part for them, hands up, a little bow, as if making way for wealthy citizens. You take another bite of bread and amble along the quay where the planks feel softer than you expect. The water below is slate blue, folded over itself like cloth laid on cloth. A tiny crab decides your shadow is dangerous and runs sideways with the speed of a rumor. You pass a jar seller arranging clay pots by height short, too tall, like a terracotta procession. He pretends not to notice that the tallest one is slightly offended by its own thinness. You assure it silently that tall and thin jars are very fashionable in Alexandria. A gull drops to hover near your shoulder, feather tips whispering. You give it the corner of a date and whisper, a bribe against future theft. The bird hops once, taking the gift with the solemn air of an official approval. It cries once, a stamp of some kind, and wheels upward. You decide that counts as good paperwork. On the far side of the harbor, a pilot boat returns. The pilot's hand making small, thoughtful motions, testing the air as if it was soup on a spoon. You've watched pilots do this your whole life, and still enjoy the theater of it. The sea answers differently every day, and he treats it like a shy friend who needs coaxing. Beyond him, beyond the headland, the open water waits with the long patience of a road that knows you will always come back to it. You pause and take that in, the way a mason steps back from a wall for a moment to see if it's true. Two workers carry a scale past you, the wooden arms polished by decisions. Honest scales, honest stones. These are the bones of trust. You explain this to new hands sometimes, but you do it simply. We weigh what we trade because our words deserve a place to sit. It makes sense to most people, even to the ones whose words sometimes fidget. You touch the edge of the scale as it passes. A small greeting between professionals. A sailor calls your name from the deck of your vessel and points to the four lashings. You answer with a wave. That means, I see it, I'll see to it, and also, please don't fall in. He salutes with the energy of someone who has only had one cup of tea and is pretending it was two. You return to the ropeway by the pier, run your fingers along the fibers. They feel like a promise kept along rough, but reliable. You tie and tuck, and when the rope sighs with relief, you nod. A proper conversation between you and the day's work begun. In the market lane, a musician settles on a step, draws the first real melody from his lute, a slow ribbon that settles into the air and refuses to leave. Ambient, soft lute strums. You let the tune catch your stride, and you move with it, unhurried. The sun edges free of the horizon, spills coins of light across the water, and everyone pretends not to notice just how beautiful it is, because it would be rude to stare at a host's generosity. You pocket that thought for later, maybe to trade. For a better price on pepper, you stop at a stall for a small packet of crushed resin, just enough to perfume your little room when the wind is sulking. The vendor pinches a bit onto a coal, and the smoke lifts like a prayer that's forgotten the words but remembers the tune. Myrrh, frankincense, names that travel farther than most people do. They go into temples, into homes, into the sleeves of thoughtful people who want the air around them to be gentle. You hold the packet and think of all the miles in it. A runner from the weighing yard jogs past, sandals flicking dust, and calls that the first caravan is down from the east. You feel the city turn its head toward that news, the way a cat pretends it's uninterested in a bird and then swivels its ears. New loads to count, new entries to ink, new arguments about whether a sack is damp because of rain or because sacks are naturally moody before sunrise. You finish your bread, wipe your fingers on the paper that will later carry fish for lunch, and set off. Your feet choose the known path along the shore, where the wash leaves faint lace on the sand. And you accept the company of little things, the clink of a small anchor chain, the hush of the tide, the murmur of two elders deciding which ship looks luckiest today. You run a hand along a sun-warmed post and think, yes, this day will do. The monsoon will not answer you yet, but the breeze strokes the back of your neck in a way that feels like a nod. You angle away from the water, up toward the low rise where the warehouses crouch with their big doors and bigger patience. There, the air tastes more of wood and dust and cargo, less of brine, though the sea lingers like a friend who can't resist one more story. You pass a painted mark on a lintel, someone's way of saying, here, these goods are watched, these goods are known, and you take comfort from it. The morning light slants along the alley and lays a promise on the threshold. You step into the shade with your ledger tucked under your arm, ready to count what the road has delivered, while the harbor hums behind you like a lullaby you can always hear if you listen. Inside the dim cool of the warehouse, the air feels still enough to fold. Yet even here you sense the day's-long breath gathering itself outside. You set your ledger on a barrel lid and stand for a quiet moment, letting your skin be your first instrument. The breeze that slips through the doorframe is shy, tasting of salt and warm rope. It carries a hint of greenery from the inland fields, and a whisper of resin from the yard where someone has cracked open a fresh jar. You listen, not with your ears only, but with that part of you that has learned the sea's mood the way you learn a friend's footsteps on a staircase. The morning says, not rushing, but ready. When people say monsoon, you picture a direction before you picture a storm. You remind new crew that a monsoon is simply a wind that changes its mind by season, like a polite host who knows when to escort guests to the door and when to invite them in. In one season, the great breath moves you east, toward Arabia and India. In the other, it carries you back across the long hallway of blue. You don't need complicated words for that. The sea breathes out, you go with it. The sea breathes in, you come home. You step back to the doorway and tip your face to the light. Above the harbor, thin feathers of cloud lie high and careless, pointing like quiet fingers. You learned as a child to read the sky as a page. Thick towers mean business, thin streaks mean patience. When a row of small, even clouds appears far out to sea, it's like hearing drums on the far road. Company is coming, but not yet. The best part is the nosework. You pretend you can smell the month in the wind, and on good days, you almost can. Early season like clean linen, middle season like damp earth, late season like a cupboard where someone forgot pepper. A sail flaps lazily outside, a canvas sigh. That answers your thoughts. Ambient, low wind, canvas flapping, water lapping. The water at the quay makes it soft, patient sounds, the kind that never hurry you but never stop either. The monsoon to the east, the one that fattens rivers and makes roofs. Drum with rain pulls ships from these shores toward India when the world is warmest. You don't say all the months aloud. You say the feeling. Days get longer, clouds pile up like cushions, and the wind settles into your sail from behind, like a strong hand that doesn't need to show off. When that season stands up fully, you plan your departures the way a farmer plans a harvest. You count not only days, but the color of mornings, the way smoke lifts from cooking fires, the cheerfulness of gulls. Harbor masters love to sound official, but you keep it simple. You want the wind that pushes you where you mean to go without arguments. Fighting a season is like arguing with a mountain. Better to sit, mend, share bread, and let the world turn, the way it always turns. The return breath, from the northeast, is a different mood, cooler, tidier, less theatrical. On those mornings, the air tastes cleaner, as if the sea has opened its windows. Leaves inland shiver a little differently, and the line of the swell seems to point back toward home even before you've cleared the headland. That wind brings you out of India's river mouths and along Arabia's coffee-colored shores, then through the Gate of Tears and up the comb of the Red Sea to your own familiar posts and postscripts. You have come to feel the shift in your bones. One season your shoulders lean forward, the next they lean back. A boy trots by the doorway with a bundle of pomfiber rope, and you stop him with a grin that pretends to be serious. Which way? Today, you ask, nodding to the sky. He blinks toward the masts, licks his finger like an old pilot, and holds it up. The wind kisses one side, then the other, undecided. He shrugs with the confidence of youth. Whichever we prefer, he says. You wish all days were like that. You press a date into his hand and watch him go, the rope bumping his legs like a loyal dog. You walk the length of the warehouse, fingers brushing crates labeled in neat marks and smudged ones. Planning for the monsoon is not a matter of sudden drama, it's a slow stacking of small certainties. You measure sacks so they can be moved in a hurry without tearing. You rub a little oil into the stitching of leather pouches so damp air won't bully them. You sprinkle resin on the floor so the room smells like confidence. Gentle work, but it adds up. You don't race the season, you befriend it. Outside, the clouds gather a little more purpose, and you think of how other traders have taught you their favorite signs. A fisherman you trust swears he can read the wind from the way the gulls land always into the breeze, little white arrows pointing your route. A potter's wife says she can tell by her kill. Certain days the fire needs more coaxing, other days less, and her kill has never once lied. You collect these bits of truth the way you collect seals on your ledger, each one a small help when the mast hesitates and you're wondering whether to hoist more canvas or pour more tea. For the younger hands, you explain one idea that sounds fancier than it is. Downwind. You show them by walking. If we stand here and the wind is on the back of your neck, then that way, you point ahead, is downwind. That's the way the wind wants to go. If we go that way, we're letting the sea's breath carry us like a leaf on a stream. If someone says the other word, upwind, you shrug and smile. That's the way your legs get tired. They laugh, and because they laugh, they remember. On the quay, you pause by a coil of line and watch a pilot boat write small calligraphy. On the water, the oars dip and rise with the care of someone feeding a baby in the dark. A crewman on your own ship loosens the sail just enough that it mutters under its breath, trying out syllables of the day. You can feel the season not only in wind and cloud, but in the way people move. Early monsoon, quick steps, jokes that jump. Late monsoon, longer glances at the horizon, lists with more lines, knots tied and RETIED. You take one more breath as a quiet test. The air carries a whetstone smell from the south, and a line of haze has grown where sea meets sky. That, for you, is a yes. You begin to count backwards from departure, not in hours, exactly, but in tasks. First, the cargo that sits close to damp and close to hot spices, cloth, wooden chests must be dressed against the sea like travelers against rain. Then the heavy goods, the honest thud's ivory, salt, hides must be balanced so the boat walks level, not like a proud bird. Listing to one side, you turn back into the warehouse and begin the quiet talk with objects that you've perfected over the years. You run your palm over a bale of cotton and tell it the truth. You will thank me for this wrapping. You check the clay jars and tap each one. A good sound answers with a soft ring, a bad one with a sulk. You mark lids with quick strokes. It came from, who will smile when it opens, what you promised and what they promised. These little marks are your other wind. They blow you back to the same ports as a welcome guest. A partner arrives, his hair salted by work, his hands already counting even before he sees a thing. Together, you move in a rhythm that barely needs words. He mentions the current, and you translate because some words can scare the sleep out of a listener. That's just the slow river inside the big water. You say, we point a little to one side so it sets us down where we mean to go. He nods, relieved to be reminded that even complicated water is only water that prefers one direction today. You pause again at the threshold, not to delay, but to confirm. The breeze now presses a bit steadier against your forearms, like a friend, insisting you really must come to dinner. The harbor answers with more canvas news. Ambient, low wind, canvas flapping, water lapping. A gull balances on a post, its tail flicking to keep the invisible straight line of wind out past the masts. The skin of the sea shows a darker band where the breath is stronger, cat's fur brushed backward by an affectionate hand. You nod. The calendar in your lungs has turned a page. Gentle humor keeps nerves tidy at this stage. You tell the tallyman that if the wind were a person, today it would be that relative who arrives early and begins setting the table without asking. He snorts and writes faster. You tell the new deckhand that if he can taste pepper on the air, it's time to pack pepper deeper. He licks his lips experimentally and swears he can. You give him a jar anyway. You move down the row of goods planned for the East Run. Bundles of hides stitched tight. Baskets of glass beads that chime softly like tiny bells when lifted. Neat. Rolls of cloth already sticky with protective oil. Jars of resin that will make distant rooms smell like warm light. You place heavier things low, gentler things high, always thinking in pairs and balances. You show a new clerk your simple rule. If a crate looks as if it would prefer to sit, let it sit. If it looks as if it wants to lean on a friend, give it one. At the far end of the room, the door onto the quay feels like the first page of a book you have read many times and still love. You stand there with your palm on the frame, letting the breeze write its note across your skin. You don't need to hurry it, and it doesn't need to hurry you. The monsoon is a long conversation. You speak when it pauses. You stretch your back, roll your shoulders, and smile at the ordinary miracle that the world's great lungs are about to carry you once more from this doorway to those other doorways where friends will raise cups and someone will try to sell you something you don't need, and you might buy it anyway. The gull gives a single approving cry, and the canvas along the quay answers like applause from a polite audience. You nod to the day and turn back to your crew with the simplest of orders, which is also a promise. Begin to prepare the goods for shipment. The wind will have its say, you will have yours. And between the two of you, a ship will glide from this calm shade into the wide, breathing light. You ease the warehouse door until it sighs shut, and the room accepts you. The hush steady and kind. Dust motes hang in the slant of light, like sleepy fireflies deciding whether to dance or nap. Your table is where you left it, a smooth plank, a quiet inkpot, a stack of lists rolled like little scroll snakes waiting to uncurl. The ledger opens with a soft yawn of pages, and you feel your shoulders settle as if the paper has set out a cushion just for you. You start with ivory, because ivory likes to be first. The tusks lie on padded planks, pale as moon slices, their curves calm and self-confident. When you place your palm against one, it holds the night's cool, and the faint cross-hatching near the cut end shows the slow spiral of years, tidy like the inside of a shell. You don't need fancy words to explain what makes it valuable. It carves well, feels smooth, and shines like quiet water. Your quill taps the page too tall, one medium, one shorthand. You add a note for a carver inland who owes you a pair of chess kings. The balance scale waits. You lift one tusk, settle it on the pan, and lay out the stamped stones on the other side, each stone marked with a familiar symbol, so everyone agrees what one means. The arm floats even, the pointer smiles. You breathe, ink the number, and the trust grows another ring like a tree. A crate thumps gently to aisles over careful hands. Good hands and ostrich feathers make their entrance the way they do everything. dramatically and with no effort. They're bundled in soft fans, the whites like clouds you could wear. You shake one very lightly, and it creates its own weather. These are bound for headpieces, and fans, and little dusters that make the rich feel helpful. Your nose twitches. Feathers and dust are close friends. You add a neat line to the ledger. Feathers, fine, 20 fans worth, and a smaller line under it. Do not sneeze on profits. A small weight lands on your lap. The warehouse cat, striped and serially employed, has decided your thighs are a pillow and your ledger a footrest. You privately suspect the cat is on retainer from the gods of patience. It purrs, which is both a compliment and an instruction to remain perfectly still. You practice the ancient art of balancing ledgers while balancing a dozing cat. It turns out both require a steady hand and the willingness to ignore pins and needles in your left foot. Gold dust, next. Not by drama but by prudence. 2 little leather pouches, sealed with string and wax. You tap them so the dust settles. You like to imagine each grain raising its hand for attendance. With a nod to the cat who blinks the official blink of a deputy, you break the seal and pour the fine, sun-colored sand into a shallow bowl. It slumps like a tiny dune. Gold doesn't argue. It just sits there being itself, a quiet gravity that makes people careful. You weigh it on the small scale with the tiny weights, the ones that feel like jewelry for your fingers and record. The total, you explain it aloud, in case a new clerk is listening behind a crate. We agree on the stones first, then we agree on the number. The gold doesn't change, only our memory does, so we write it down. The cat approves by not waking. Hides line the next rack in thick folds, browned by smoke and sun, smelling like hard work in a winter hut. You press a thumb into one. Still supple, no cracks. These travel well. Hug the belly of a ship like old friends. You count by layers 5, 10, 15 and mark their quality with a simple mark you and your partners share. A little sign that means kept in shade, kept in trust. If hides could talk, they would say they are patient. You thank them anyway, and note which will trade for cloth and which for wine. Salt is honest, even when it clumps. You love its sparkle in the slanting light, a pile of tiny crystals pretending to be a snowdrift from a story you once heard. The larger bars pressed and dried carry the pale memory of the pans where they were born. Salt is more than taste. It's a keeper of food, a cure for dull stew, a reason people walk farther than they planned. You scrape your fingernail along a block and let a few grains ping back into place, then weigh the stack. Salt lies, an old porter used to joke, but only about its weight when damp. To be safe, you take the weight of the sacks first empty, subtract that later when full. You call it removing the basket's opinion. Everyone seems to understand that dot bars for trade sit in a neat row, their edges worn by decisions. Some are copper-stained, some dull silver, some simple iron that will be reborn as tools. They have marks stamped into them, teeny pictures, little word signs that say who made them and who stands behind them. You run your thumb over the stamps the way you greet an old friend by the shoulder. Bars are a promise that travels well. Easier to carry than heaps of coins, easier to measure than smiles. On the balance, each bar's truth arrives with a swing, a pause, and a calm settling. You like that moment. It's the scale's way of nodding dot from the other side of the warehouse. A porter rolls in the first crates of incoming goods, and the room takes a polite breath. Glassware clinks softly, a choir of little bells. You lift a cup and hold it up to the light greenish. Tiny bubbles caught like ancient breath. The rim just a little uneven where a human hand finished it. Perfect, because it isn't perfect. You line the pieces by size and number, and note which should be nested for the ride, and which deserve their own straw thrones. A jar catches the beam of sun and throws a green coin onto the wall. The cat considers chasing it, decides against it, returns to payroll. Wine follows, the amphorae cool and damp under their clay skins. You sniff the mouth of one fig, smoke, the promise of small arguments made kind by the second cup. You chalk each handle, traders, mark, volume, destination. For volume you use the simplest truth. A standard jar is a standard jar because you have one everyone recognizes. You keep it on a shelf like a small, steady king. You fill, you compare, and suddenly enough means the same thing in 2 languages. Beads, arrive singing. Only beads can sing without sound. You pour a small cascade into your palm, blue like river shade, red like pomegranate, white like morning breath hand. They settle into the lines of your skin with the softest hush. These pay for stories as much as goods. You count by scoops, each scoop a measured friend, and then weigh the total to keep the count honest. Nothing fancy, a known scoop, an agreed stone, a number in the ledger. You think, not for the first time, that fairness is just a habit with nice handwriting. Cotton cloth rolls smell faintly of seed and clean sun. You unroll an arm's length and let it fall back in a soft wave, checking the weave with your fingertips. Tighter for robes, looser for wrapping. You write it down so you don't make someone's clothes from wrapping and someone's jars from clothes. You measure length with a cord knotted at the right places, a friendly, traveling ruler that never complains. The cat flicks an ear at the tick-tick of the knots passing your fingers and goes back to practicing stillness. Pepper cannot enter a room without announcing itself. One jar yawns open and the air gets busier. Nose tingles, your eyes threaten. Melodrama, and you laugh through it because Pepper is simply exciting. You crush a grain between finger and thumb and the scent leaps like a small firework. You weigh the jars, remember to subtract the jar's opinion, and make a careful note to pack these high and dry. Pepper sulks if it gets damp, and when Pepper sulks, everyone sneezes at the wrong time. A sneeze at the sealed table can ruin a flourish. Numbers bloom into tidy columns. You balance one column against another, and the cat balances one paw against your patience. You tell yourself that, all joke if the ledger doesn't balance. Perhaps the cat is a very small elephant hand that helps. The truth is simpler. You check again. This is how trust is made. Not by speeches, but by the quiet habit of checking twice with the same calm face. You invite the porter to watch. You invite the buyer to watch, and the scale swings the same way no matter who is standing there. That sameness is worth more than the goods themselves. You take a moment to explain, as you always do when a new helper wanders close. You lift the balance scale gently. 2 plates, 1 beam. You say, when they sit level, the world agrees. These stones carry marks, everyone knows. We all decide, ahead of time, that this mark means this much. So even if we don't share a language for jokes or weather, we share a language for fairness. You show the measuring scoop, the knotted cord, the standard jar. These are our translators. The helper nods, and you feel that small, quiet satisfaction that comes from a truth turning into a tool in someone else's hand. You seal amphory with warm wax, press your ring into it, and the mark cools like a small moon on a still pond. You tie soft padding around the glass, and whisper to it, as if it were an easily startled friend. You tuck beads into cloth so they won't gossip themselves loose. You stack hides where the shade is deepest, and lay salt where any stray damp will think twice. The cat finally yawns, turns once in a full circle of opinion, and hops down. Freedom. Pins and needles retreat, and you laugh quietly at the sudden lightness. A whole extra column of totals leaps easier when your lap is not a rented sunbeam. You close the ledger for a breath, palms on the cover, feeling how the day's careful marks already weigh less than they did when they were only intentions. Then you open again and add a last page, a clean list for loading in order: heavy low, fragile high, peppers proud but dry, gold close, beads cushioned, wine snug, ivory cradled. You rise, and the warehouse air seems to tilt very gently toward the door, as if even the dust motes know what's next. The harbor's outside voice drifts in, a soft weave of calls and canvas, a rhythm that matches your steps without showing off. You roll the lists, tuck them into their leather sleeve, and run your hand along the nearest crate as you pass. A quiet blessing for uncomplicated journeys dot at the threshold. You listen once more to the scales settling on their hooks, the ink leaning into its pot, the room's slow heartbeat resuming its everlasting patience. You leave it tidy numbers aligned, seals cooling, cats stretching, and carry the ledger's calm out into the brighter hum. The gangplank waits with its own small promise of creaks, and the ship beyond breathes in the harbor light, ready to receive whatever the quiet arithmetic of this room has made true. Your palm meets the gangplank, warm where the sun has found it smooth where bare feet have argued their case year after year. The wood gives a small, agreeable creak like an old friend who pretends to be surprised to see you, and you step aboard into the familiar cradle of the deck. Pitch and salt greet you first, a deep resinous scent braided with yesterday's rope and this morning's bread on someone's breath. The hull hums softly as little waves press and release, press and release. The ship breathing with the harbor's chest. You kneel to lay your hand on the plank seam and feel the ship's quiet stitches under your fingertips. The boards are cousins, not strangers. Along the seams, you can follow the faint line where palm fibers pass through paired holes, stitching plank to plank, a patient embroidery done with strong hands and salty patience. Where the stitching ends, round wooden pegs take over, sunk into tidy holes, pinning the stubborn bits that prefer persuasion to conversation. It isn't one technique or the other. Like most good things at sea, it's a cheerful compromise. Sewn where seams must flex, pegged where force must stand. You press, and the joint springs a whisper and settles again. Yes, the Red Sea likes to test every promise. These ones hold. The lashings speak when the wind passes. Ropes made from palm fibers slide over themselves with the gentle rasp of a cat grooming. They loop the frames, hug the thwarts, kiss the mast in places where wood meets wood and requires a translator. You tug one, and it answers with that tight, musical note that says, "I'm awake." Palm rope is full of memory. Give it a day, and it remembers the knot you taught it. Give it a season, and it remembers the shape of your voyage. The lines crawl upward into a forest of purpose. Mast, yard, stays that hold everything tall and brave. Our sail sleeps furled, but even in sleep it looks ready, a great triangle waiting for a story. Red Sea craft like ours carry a slanting yard long and confidence so the sail can lean and listen to the wind from many angles. You run your fingers along the canvas, and it is the texture of tough linen crossed with sea tails, rough enough to grip, soft enough to forgive your hand. When it's set, the cloth will belly like a satisfied breath, and the ship will lean into that breath like someone walking into a friendly arm. You trail your fingers over the rail and down to the whole line, where the curve is more than pretty, it's a promise. Full in the belly for carrying ivory, hides, pepper, and jars without pouting. Finer toward the bow, so the water parts without arguments. The shape is not fancy math for you. It's a story you learned with your knees and shoulder blades. The way the ship moves you when it's happy, and the way it rolls its eyes when you've loaded pepper too far forward. You nod an apology to the memory of that lesson, and vow to keep the pepper proud but aft. A light tapping floats from below like patient rain. It's just a carpenter reminding a peg that today is work day. Small, steady taps, not punishment, more like encouragement. Keep the ship in the mood to be a ship. You breathe the smell of warm pitch, that tarry sweetness that clings to hair and hope. And you think, if courage had a scent, it would be this, stubborn, bright in sunlight, unwilling to wash off. At the stern waits the long steering oar, the ship's quiet tongue. You fit your hand around its worn grip, and it fits you back, polished by years of just so. It is not a wheel, it is a conversation, a tilt to this side, a firm hand to that, the blade biting the water with a satisfied chuckle. On days when the sea is snippy, the steering oar sulks like a noble who lost at a board game. On mornings like this, it only pretends to sulk. You whisper, "Tea later," and swear the rudder stands a little taller. Your first mate arrives from the foredeck with a coil of line in his arms, and the day in his eyes. Kidane is broad in the shoulders, calm in the knuckles, the sort of calm that comes from settling 100 rope disagreements without raising his voice. He wears a scrap of red cloth around one wrist that his daughter tied there for luck, and he pretends it's purely decorative. He nods at the yard, then at you, a shorthand you both understand. "We'll lift when the breeze says please." He speaks to the crew with that gentle authority you hear on good fishing mornings. One word, and everyone shifts a handspan. 2 words, and the whole deck breathes together. A first mate like that is the difference between work and work that feels like music. Near the mastfoot, our navigator squints at the sky with complicated friendliness. Hassan keeps a little bag of polished shells and stones he lays out in patterns only he and the wind understand. He's as much listener as watcher, to the slap of water against the pier, to the gossip of gulls, to the invisible grain of the air. He taught you the trick of tasting the wind, not because wind has flavor, but because it makes you pay attention. Today he tastes and smiles. River in the sky is flowing east, he murmurs, by which he means the wind's slow lane is pointed the right way. He carries a length of cord knotted at familiar distances, a walking memory of coast, from Magellan to the next friendly harbor. He claims the cord is older than he is, and won't argue back. You believe him on both counts. From the galley comes a puff of steam that smells like millet and kindness. Me brat, who can feed 6 with enough left for a 7th, that only exists in stories, lifts a lid and lets the scent wander the deck as a form of recruitment. She has the cook's sacred power to improve morale by turning water, grain, and spice into something that tastes like gratitude. Her ladle is also a gavel sheet, taps it once and a sailor remembers to drink water, twice and someone returns the knife they borrowed. She keeps a pouch of pepper, the way a scribe keeps ink, close and defended. If you lost your way between stars and shoreline both, you suspect you could navigate home by following the trail of her laughing. You walk the length of the deck, letting the textures report in. The planks are warm where the sun has introduced itself, cool where a coil of rope has saved a patch for later. The lashings along the frames hum when you pluck them, each at a slightly different note, together a chord that says the ship is tuned. You check the mast partners, the thick places where mast meets deck, pressing your thumb into the wood to feel for soft spots, and finding none. Good bones, comfortable skin, a smile that reaches the eyes. The crew moves the way you like. Not in a rush, not in a dawdle, just in the rhythm of people who know the order of things. To roll a barrel with their fingertips, so as not to bruise it. One splices a new eye into a line, his mouth making the same shape as the loop without meaning. Tuto. Another oils the cleats, working the cloth into the grain until it gleams like rain on stone. No one shouts because no one needs to. Songs happen on their own, the low, almost reluctantly cheerful hum of a verse everyone knows only the first line of. A gull tries to join in and is politely ignored. At the bow, you crouch to lay a palm along the stem where small knocks from last season left their signatures. You feel for weakness and find only stories. The rope here is rougher, braided, thicker, where the anchor line runs. You check the lashings that hold the frames to the planking, clever loops and hitches that let the ship flex in, swell without sulking about it. The Red Sea enjoys a surprise. Sharp little chops that appear from nowhere, polite one moment and slap happy the next. A sewn and lashed hole doesn't fight that. It sighs and goes with it, like a dancer with better balance. Then pride. You open the small locker that holds spare pegs and wedges. They're not glamorous, no one writes poems to pegs, but these little cylinders are the alphabet of holding things together. You choose one, test it in a board hole, feel the snug bite, and smile. The carpenter gives you a look that says, "I was going to do that," and you return a look that says, "I know." And the peg is happy to be the subject of diplomacy. Rope snakes across the deck in easy brown rivers. You follow one to the capstan, patting the drum like an obliging ox. When the anchor wants to come up, it will turn in a circle, and the deck will lean into the effort without argument. You love the cooperative machinery of it, wood and rope doing math with muscle instead of numbers. A line runs through a simple block, a wooden pulley, with a smooth wheel and multiplies the hands you have. You explain it to new ones with the same line every season. We make the rope do the heavy thinking so our backs can remain available for celebrating. Kidane returns, loosening a hitch and retying it with the neat vanity of a man whose knots could be used as examples in temples. He checks the belaying pins, those rows of wooden fingers waiting to hold lines fast, and makes sure each has the line it prefers. Some pins and some lines have old marriages, and it's not wise to meddle. He says nothing, but his eyebrows deliver a small sermon about order that everyone hears. Hassan drifts to your side and tilts his chin toward the mouth of the harbor. The water out there has dark strokes where the breeze is stronger, stripes painted by a patient god. He rubs a smudge of pitch between his fingertips and says, in his quiet way, "Shall we?" which in sailor speak is a poem about faith, food, and a fair wind. You feel the ship lean, very slightly, as if pointing its nose toward the suggestion. From the galley, Mibrat appears with a shallow bowl, and that kava, a ladle, before the sea borrows all your attention, she says, pressing warm porridge into your hands. It tastes like a hinged door opening to a known room. Smooth, simple, a pinch of salt, a laugh of honey, a dot of spice. You eat, standing, as sailors do when they want to rush, but have learned not to. She tucks a packet of flatbread under your arm and swats your elbow as if you were a son who forgot a scarf. You move aft again to the steering oar. Put your hands on the smooth handle and feel the day gather. The deck hushes to listen to the harbor. Ambient. Harbor murmurs, a breeze slides in the kind that makes lines wake and sails think about becoming birds. Kadain calls a gentle order. Hassan nods. Mebrat ties back a stray curl and secures her cooking pots as if they were small, precious planets. The crew drifts to their places the way stars drift to familiar constellations, not by force, by habit. You glance along the lashings, the seams, the pegs, the proud triangular sail, sleeping and ready. The ship has no hurry and no doubt. It knows its work the way your hands know the ledger margins. Your fingertips still carry the memory of ivory's coolness, peppers tickle, the calm weight of honest stones. Now they learn again the language of the tiller's wood, how it wants to be held when the wind stands up, how it sulks if you ignore it too long, how a mug of tea bribes both wood and captain to be agreeable. Dot along the rail, the lines that tie you to land wait, like old conversations ready to be concluded. You feel that small, electric shiver that comes just before departure, the ship, remembering that it is not a house. The harbor, remembering that it is not a lake. You remembering that you are not a ledger with legs. Hassan's cord of knots swings. At his belt, Kadain's red wrist cloth flutters like a discreet flag. Mebrat's ladle taps the bench once, twice, a blessing disguised as housekeeping. You draw one long breath of pitch and salt and sun, and let it out with the quiet certainty of a promise kept. The crew's hands find their lines. The yard creaks a friendly hello as it begins to lift. Ropes slide, blocks murmur. The harbor answers with gull laughter and the sop of small waves against wood. You nod, and the first mate nods, and the navigator nods, and even the cook's ladle nods, and the ship seems to smile in the curve of its bow. Asterisk, the lines to shore go slack, then thoughtful, then ready for that simple, important moment when someone says the word that means freedom, spoken politely. You ease the steering oar, just to feel the weight of the water's opinion, and it approves with a low, contented pull. The crew stands easy but alert. The sail gathers a first breath. The ship leans toward the light like a plant that has found its window. And without any fuss you are already gliding toward the place where ropes will be untied and the harbor will become a memory softened by distance. The lines give their last polite slack and slip free, and your ship answers with the smallest shiver of relief, like shoulders after a long hug. The sail climbs in a measured unfurl, canvas loosening its sleep creases, the yard easing forward as if bowing to the morning. You take the tiller in two hands and nudge, not commanding, just suggesting, and the hull sighs as it turns its cheek to the breeze. The harbor, generous as always, steps back to make room. Its voice is soft as wool. You test the wind the way you taste a soup lift a palm. Let it brush your skin. Ask, are you ready? The answer comes as a round, steady push. On the sail, not a shove, a conversation. The cloth fills the sheet, hums in your hand like a string plucked by a friendly ghost. You give the tiller a second nudge to keep the bow from gossiping with the pier, and the ship drifts into the channel, keel finding the groove the water kept just for you. You grin at the quiet geometry of it all. Triangle of canvas, length of wood, a few angles befriending a breeze. The harbor recedes by small courtesies. A porter raises two fingers in a lazy salute. The baker's doorway exhales another round of warm bread. A gull reconsiders your generosity and decides it prefers the next boat. The soundscape thins to timber song and water breath creak. Pause. Lap. Creak pause. Lap hand. Somewhere on shore, a faint voice lifts into the morning. A call stitched to the air, floating across the water as naturally as mist. You let the notes hang on the rigging for a moment before the wind carries them aft. One last ribbon from land to tie around your day. Your pilot stands loose-limbed near the bow, a bundle of local knowing wrapped in a salt-stained cloak. He is the sort of person coasts create, eyes tuned to the sea's handwriting. See how he points not grandly, with a fingertip the size of a plan, but with a small tilt of chin, a narrowing of the eyes. He reads the darker streaks where the surface tightens, the pale patches over a shoal, the playful, careless riffles where two little currents meet to argue politely. Foam tells him which way the water is walking. Birds tell him where the small fish flee and where the big ones dine. Even the smell changes riversweet near an unseen inlet, rock sharp near a reef that likes to surprise strangers. Asterisks stay on the river in the sea, he murmurs, and you see it when he says it. A band of water that moves like a slow road beneath the surface. If you drift out of it, the bow drags as if the ship has suddenly grown shy. In it, the hull relaxes, shoulders down, stride easy. He fingers a lead line, no mysterious tool, just a cord with a shaped weight at the end, and lets it kiss the bottom now and then. When it returns, speaking of depth, it's as if the sea cleared its throat. Low here, lower there, mind the bar. And because land is still near, he also keeps a pair of landmarks in a neat line in the white notch, in the cliff and the crooked palm, so long as they sit one above the other. You are safely threaded between hidden teeth. 2 points making one path. That's the kind of math even the sleepiest crewman trusts. You stand with the tiller tucked into the curve of your hand and watch the sail draw. Soft geometry, you like to call it, because these are shapes that behave kindly. The yard leans, the mast answers, the sheet tightens, and the whole triangle listens to the wind like a dog listening for its name. You don't speak in angles, you speak in feelings. A little too tight, and the canvas coughs. A little too loose, and it sulks. You offer the smallest adjustment, the way you might straighten a sleeping child's blanket, and the sail settles with a pleased belly. The ship leans just enough to make your bones remember last season, in a good way. The pilot's hand flicks toward a headland that pushes its nose into the channel. Eddy, he says, and you picture it as a swirl drawn in chalk water looping back on itself like a thought. You don't fight it. You let the loop brush your hull, and you angle across its shoulder, exactly as you would step off a moving walkway, sideways, easy, letting it carry you for a heartbeat before your own stride takes over. The ship approves with a low, chesty note, and the wake lays itself neatly behind you like a well-made bed. Off the starboard bow, the coast writes a long, uncomplicated sentence in rock and sand. Agilis settles into a softer outline. The hills behind her turn into folded cloth. Farther ahead, haze lifts where the day is already warming that other piece of water strayed with 2 names and a single intent. You give the tiller a thoughtful nudge and ask it to remember. It does. The blade bites, the stern swings a whisper, and your prow points toward the place where seas change their minds. When day leans into evening, or when night sits either side of dawn, the sky becomes the gentlest map you know. Near shore, you still watch stars, not because you cannot see the land, but because the sky is a promise that doesn't sink in fog. If you were out after sunset tonight, you'd find a steady friend, the North Star, hanging where the world keeps its hinge. It doesn't move much, which is exactly the sort of virtue a road sign should have. Keep it a certain height above the rail, and you stay in your latitude, the way a child keeps a hand on a wall in a dark hallway. Other lights have their turns, a bright one low canopus, like a fisherman with a lamp, serious, sharp as a bead, the curve of the Big Dipper's handle pouring out the hour. You don't need names to feel their rhythm, you only need the patient trick of looking slightly beside them, letting their glow come to you. For speed, well, speed is a big word for something meant to be slow and safe, but for pace, the pilot watches the water slide past a chip of wood tossed from the bow. He counts the heartbeats between chip and stern and makes that small face people make when they do easy sums in their heads. If the chip lingers, you open the sail's shoulder. If it races, you smile and pretend not to be proud. These are old tricks and kind ones, the way grandmothers measure flour with a cupped hand and always get it right. The crew falls into that traveling hush that holds more companionship than conversation. Kidane adjusts the forward sheet with a motion so smooth it looks like the rope moved itself. Hassan checks the edge of cloud above the headland and returns, a nod to you as if he had just spoken with the weather and it said please. From the galley, Mabrat's ladle taps a soft rhythm against the Pata kitchen. Metronomen, a spoonful of spiced water finds its way to your hand. You sip and taste cinnamon and steadying, and your mouth says ah in a language known Aboard any ship that ever trusted a cook, the ship starts keeping time with the channel now. The swell is small and agreeable, lifting and setting you like a big, careful hand. The timbers answer with that beloved choir of old wood, doing honest work, no complaints. Just that helpful creak that tells you where the strain lives and how it moves. You lean into the tiller and feel the blade torque through the handle. Mud bottom, then sand, then the deeper, silkier pool of open water. The pilot watches the color shift from bottle green to deeper blue and nods to himself. Pleased, the day has remembered its lines. You glanced back only once. The harbor is a smaller drawing now, a sketch rather than a painting, yet it still sends you one last gift. A trailing ribbon of scent-baked bread, pitch, a pocket of warm street. You let it go without tugging. Ahead, the sea opens like a curtain, drawn with two hands. You and the wind agree on a heading by instinct and courtesy. To starboard, the coast curls like a cat. To port, the broader blue waits with the patience of a teacher who has taught generations of hulls how to be brave. Tiller wants the lightest touch. You give it that fingers not fist sand. It rewards you by making the bow's thoughts your own. A slight weathercocking near the point. You counter with a thumb. A flirt of current shouldering across the channel. You slide half a handspan and the ship steps aside, as if someone said, please. You wonder, as you always do on departures, whether the stars tonight will tell the same story they told last season, or if they have a new joke saved for you in the dark. Curiosity is a kind wind. It fills sails you didn't know you had. The pilot shows you one more trick. As the channel widens, he lines up a dip in the hills, with a notch in the nearer ridge, and keeps them married for a few breaths. Safe water, he says simply, which is all the credential you need. When land begins to unspool into distance, he will climb into his own small boat with a pouch of your thanks and a promise, then lean on his oars and become a dot that knows the way home backward and forward. You salute the dot because you owe it more than your pride can say. The call of a Pharaoh watchtower bell drifts and loses itself in the broader silence. The swell lengthens. The ship's roll slows to the tempo of bigger water. Hassan traces, a quiet arc with his finger, the route that brushes the coast, but not too closely. The graceful path that keeps you friendly with the land's advice and free of the land's bad habits. He has already tucked away a thought about where the evening breeze will slide off the cliffs and where the night air will cool quicker. He has the unhurried confidence of someone who has watched the sky forget and remember itself many times. You take another tiny sip of wind with your outstretched hand. Ready, it says now, with a flavor of salt and a promise of distance. The sail flexes in agreement. The sheet hums a long, low note. The timbers stretch like a cat at a sunlit window and settle into the work of moving a floating village along a path. The world can't see, but everyone feels. The coast slides past, with its small chalk marks, outcrops, gull flurries, a line of darker water where a hidden sandbar writes its name. You keep a respectful angle, neither flirt nor snub, just enough friendliness to borrow guidance without borrowing trouble. Ahead, the horizon pinches slightly where land on both sides thinks about shaking hands. That narrowing is your next conversation. Strait, whose nickname sounds dramatic and whose reality for careful people is simply another hallway to walk politely. You rest your cheek for a moment against the tiller and feel the day's work, humming through it, harbor thinning behind, canvas breathing above current like a broad, slow animal nudging your ankle in the right direction. You murmur, "We're going," and the ship answers in wood syllables. You've spoken all your life. The pilot's boat peels away with the last raised or cadet and smooths a line as if stroking a skittish horse. Hassan tucks his star bag into his belt. Mibrat closes the galley lid with the solemnity of a small temple. The channel sides draw a little closer now, only a little, like people moving in to hear the same story. You align your bow with that quiet invitation, the soft geometry of sail and star and current forming the simplest sentence you know. Forward. And with the harbor now a kind memory and the strait beginning to write itself across your bow, you guide the ship toward that meeting of waters where patience and timing are everything. The whole sighing, the tiller nudging, the canvas smiling. In the morning wind, the water ahead pinches, not like a door slamming, more like two careful hands guiding you through. You let the sail breathe a little smaller and lay your palm on the tiller, asking it for manners. The ship leans its ear toward the passage. You can already feel the change in the sea's voice, the long vowels of open water becoming quick consonants, clipped and bright against the hull. The strait has a name with drama in it. Bob Almondeb, Gate of Tears. But you've learned that names sometimes reach for thunder, while the day itself prefers a whisper. For a careful trader, the gate opens to patience more than fear. The coastline narrows into two books, leaning toward each other. On your left, dark ridges rise in tidy stacks, old volcanoes cooled into black ribs. On your right, pale hills tilt and tumble, their faces scraped by wind, their shoulders powdered with powdery soil that remembers no rain for months. The colors keep changing, blue into bluer into a darker thread, where the bottom suddenly drops away. It's as if someone is painting while you sail, adding a little ink here, washing it with light there. Seabirds knit the sky together, white stitches flashing and vanishing, while the water below them tightens into neat little chops. That tick at your planking. You shorten the sail a touch. The cloth accepts the suggestion with a sigh. Narrow waters ask for kind speed, not proud speed. Here the sea squeezes through a bottleneck current, lifting its elbows. Wind funneled by stonehand, everything exhaustiates. Gusts arrive quicker, eddies spin a little sharper. You want your ship to answer like a dancer in a crowded room, aware of feet, respectful of sleeves, confident anyway. You think of the old pilot's proverb, a wide ocean forgives, a narrow gate keeps receipts. On the chart in your head, the strait divides into two paths around an island that sits like a cork in a bottle. One side is the slim channel, kind that encourages a person to pull in their elbows and breathe evenly. The other is wider, deeper, with more forgiving edges. You choose the broader shoulder today, not to be timid, just because being wise is cheaper than buying a new rudder. Your hand and the tiller work in little commas and periods. Nudge, pause, nudge, a quiet punctuation that keeps the bow speaking the right language. Sailors lean on stories in places like this. Someone swears that a sprig of basil tied to the mast will keep crosswinds polite. Another promises that a coin tucked under the step makes the boat eager to please. You have tried both, mostly for the pleasure of tying green leaves to wood and sliding a bright disc into the ship's pocket. Your private favorite isn't fashionable. You believe the rudder sulks if it isn't offered tea before narrow passages. You've tested this twice, and the rudder behaved beautifully after a sip. Cadane insists it was your hands, not the tea. You insist his eyebrows are jealous of your science. Both claims are probably true. The crew takes their places in the soft choreography of a squeeze. Hassan stands by the shrouds, watching not just water but the air. Because in a place like this, the wind has habits like a person. It prefers certain corners, likes to slip around headlands, enjoys surprise entrances. He points once, two fingers, like two channels, and you nod. Cadane eases the sheet, a palm's breadth. The sail relaxes its shoulders. The ship breathes out, then in time with the stronger pulse of the passage. The shorelines talk, even when they look quiet. Rock faces bounce the wind back at you like friendly tricks. Low dunes warm and set off little breezes that run down toward the water in stripes you can't see but can feel in your forearms. The birds tell you where the small fish ride the current like children on a mill race. The water itself changes colors rapidly enough that you find yourself narrating. Deep, safe, deeper, pale, careful, green line, turn a hair, blue-black, breathe. You think of why this gate's reputation grew teeth. Ships that hurry here bite their own tongues. A late turn, a greedy sail, a captain who believes opinions are more trustworthy than currents. Those are the tears in the old stories. But your stories run quieter. A cat's paw gust that you respected, a counter-eddy that you rode, like stepping off a moving walkway, an hour where you simply waited for the tide to think better of itself. Narrow waters demand two things you have learned to carry without complaint: timing and calm. You do not fight. You arrange. Watch rotation begins a step earlier than usual. In a place that compresses wind and water, you also compress attention. Two lookouts instead of one. Forward to read the seam where color changes, aft to feel the string of the sail and the hum of the rudder. You keep the changes short and regular, so no eye grows tired of noticing. Cadane handles the deck like a Quiet conductor, no grand gestures. Only small nods that pass a task from hand to hand in a smooth line. You smile at the efficiency of it all, the way order is a kind of kindness. The ship's belly hums with the little impacts of chop on plank, the timbers answering like an old choir in a small chapel. The tiller speaks through the smooth handle, as if it were your wrist's second tongue, telling you, there is a shoulder of water leaning here, there is a polite tug there, and the island to starboard has a current that curls like a comma just off its tip. You ride the commas and avoid the exclamation points. A seabird passes so near you could touch its thought, and its eye flicks toward you as if to say, yes, that's the line. It's an old habit on this passage, and even people who pretend not to care find their shoulders easing into its time. Mibra appears with a flatbread folded around something warm and savory, and she places it in your free hand as if there were always a third hand for kindness. Watch reliefs take bites as they pass without breaking stride, a traveling feast that keeps the edges smooth. You explain to the youngest deckhand with the gentlest words why you trim when you trim. See the water there, how it darkens like a bruise. That's where the tide rushes, pressed by the rocks. We angle across it, not against it. Think of it like walking with a friend who wants to talk faster. You turn a little, and suddenly, you are both at the gate without panting. He nods with exaggerated seriousness, and then grins at being part of a secret that is only patience in disguise. Lanterns stay covered in broad daylight, but you check them anyway because habits are easier to start than to find again in a hurry. Oilful wicks trimmed, the glass polished. We don't expect fog, Hassan says, which is sailor speak for fog is more likely when you don't expect it. You settle the horn shutters so they can be opened with one good thumb when twilight decides to be dramatic. A careful ship is a sleepy ship. Everything prepared before yawns, nothing decided in the middle of one. The seabirds change their calls as the land closes in more cliff voices, fewer beach voices, and you take it as another sign that you are threading the right needle. The current thins, as if the bottle's neck has widened an inch. The tiller's complaints soften to suggestions. The chop smooths. The soundscape opens back up between the beats and calls. Superstitions rise again as the island falls astern. One sailor kisses his ring and touches it to the mast. Another tosses a pinch of salt over his left shoulder and then pretends he was just wiping his hand. You grant them their comforts and keep your own, checking the cleats, touching the peg box, listening for a wrong creak and hearing none. The ship feels pleased, which is a feeling you trust. You whisper a thank you to the water anyway, because gratitude costs even less than wisdom. As the strait begins to loosen, the color of the eastern horizon changes in a way you've come to love, a faint dusty yellow over the water, a dry sweetness on the wind that suggests the Arabian shore is breathing out to meet you. The ridges there gather themselves into a darker line, and the water's pulse evens as if the sea had slipped into slippers. You ease the sheet a little more, and the sail fattens, delighted to be invited to show off again. The hull, relieved of the gate's narrow grammar, writes longer sentences on the swell. The watch rotation slides into its next chapter, with bread shared and cups passed. You crack a date with your thumbnail and pocket the seed for some future tree that will never meet you. Cadane walks the deck with his small catalogue of Tuch's line, pin while Hassan's eyes keep glancing from the water to the low sky, counting those tiny windcats that skip across the surface. Mibrat wedges a pot deeper and ties it with a mother's knot that would hold a mountain if a mountain ever needed tying. You give your neck the indulgence of a slow roll and let your gaze stretch forward. On the far right, the coast curls into inlets and shoulders, a shoreline that looks like it was drawn by a handful of dates rolling across a map. Somewhere beyond that elbow are names that already sweeten your mouth. Musa, oscillous places where the scales click thoughtfully and the air tastes of incense and dates, where dock officials pretend to be stern while peeking into your baskets. Like children peeking into a festival tent, the drum has gone quiet, the birds spread into wider loops, the chop thins into a respectable roll. You pat the tiller well-steered friend and feel the ship answer in that way it does, with a bath-warm shiver through wood and rope. The gate of tears, today, has been the gate of please and thank you. You are not fooled by politeness. You keep your hand light and your eye tidy, but you also allow yourself the comfort of the knowledge that care is often enough. Lantern checks once more as the sun leans oil. Wick, glass, shutter, and the crew answers each question with the reliable boredom of people who prefer boring. Nights at sea. The first mate sets the evening watch list, with the fairness of a miller dividing grain. Everyone gets a share of stars and a share of sleep. A last round of bread moves along the rail like a small parade. Your ship looks forward the way a camel does at the end of a straight road he is pricked. Step steady, wondering gently what smell will arrive next. The strait slides behind, its dark ridges remembering your wake for a few breaths, and then forgetting, as seas do. Ahead, the Arabian coastline grows from line to shape, to promise. You keep the sail trimmed to kindness, and the tiller under two honest fingers. The watch settles. The deck learns the longer rhythm again. And with the gate, a quiet story now. You let the bow angle toward those coffee-colored shores where market voices carry like birds on warm air. And the first lights of evening will greet you the way old friends always do, by pretending they were surprised to see you and meaning the opposite. The coastline gathers itself into ochre folds and dark stone shoulders, and your bow inclines, as if nodding hello. The water warms by a shade you can taste, a dry sweetness on the breeze that promises dates and dust and good stories. Ropes run through your palms, sun-bleached and familiar, and the ship makes that polite clearing of the throat a ship makes before entering someone else's living room. You ease the sail and let the hull drift into a cradle of small waves. A pilot's skiff bobs out to greet you, 2 strokes, 3 its oars lifting neat commas off the water. A man with cardamom on his breath steps aboard, eyes kind, hands quick, and he guides you with a few small gestures toward the open slot on the quay. The planks there look worn in the comforting way of an old bench. The lines go ashore with tidy thumps, and Cadane's knots arrive faster than the breeze can object. Your hull kisses the fenders and sighs, grateful to lean. You smell clay baked by sun, a curl of incense, the soft, brown sugar of drying dates. Somewhere, water boils with a spice that lifts the edges of your mouth into a smile. The port is Musa to Daystone and Tamarisk. Sails and shadows, though oscillous, farther back toward the gate, shares the same family of sounds and smells. Both sit like beads on the same strand of coast, calling and answering across seasons. You step ashore and the ground underfoot feels slightly elastic, packed by centuries of feet that all wanted the same things. Trade news, and a cup that warms the palms. Market voices fold around you without hurry. Pottery stands in ranks, grey. Jugs with narrow necks, fat-bellied jars, bowls with little fingerprints forever fired into their sides. A seller taps one with a knuckle, and it sings the note of good clay clear, not bragging. The jars answer in tiny clinks as they bump shoulders. Incense curls from a brazier, as if the smoke were learning to write. Myrrh gives a warm, honeyed word. Frankincense answers brighter, like sunlight on white plaster. The smoke slides into your clothes and tells you that later, long after you have left, you will reach for something in a chest, and this morning will step out to greet you again. Dates hang in dusty garlands, each sticky bead catching a grain of light. A woman with silver bracelets offers you one with a pinch of roasted sesame on top, and you swear you can hear your bones say thank you. You take a second and pretend it is for diplomacy. The scale table clicks softly, a language of balance. A merchant lifts a small brass weight with the delicacy of a jeweler and sets it down as if easing a bird into a nest. On the other pan, a heap of pepper creeps outward like eager ants, then settles when tapped. The pointer floats and centers. There it is, trust made visible, 2 plates level, and everyone exhales. You know this dance, and how to bow at the right moments. Harbor officials approach with scrolls and soot-dark stained fingers. Their faces are stern in the way faces are stern when they have a lot to remember and not enough pockets. One reads your ship's name aloud, tasting the foreign syllables, like a polite snack. Another asks your ports and your cargo, and you tell them in straight lines, not zigzags. Docking fees are a simple courtesy dressed in numbers. You pay for the space your ship takes, and the time it will rest, there like renting a mat in a very tidy guest house. A scribe draws a little boat on a board and marks a few lines beside it. You recognize the system. So many coins for a day, A little more for a boat with a belly as generous as yours, a small reduction if you promise not to sing at night. You do not sing at night. The crew is grateful. Customs is the next handshake. Goods that cross a threshold leave a tiny thank you. Behind, it keeps the harbor posts upright, pays the sweepers who gather stray grain before birds make mischief, supports the guards whose main duty is walking as if they have a secret. The rate is not a mystery. It's a recipe everyone knows. Pepper, a pinch. Cloth, a pinch and a half. Ivory, a respectful spoonful. You present your cargo list. They compare it to their own neat columns. And then the important part happens, weighing what needs to be weighed, counting what needs counting, and marking the tally with a seal. You offer the seals with quiet pleasure. Stamped beeswax carries your ring's small design. There's Carrie's, a falcon looking sideways like a very sharp official. The two sit next to each other on the paper, like neighbors sharing a wall. One man sniffs at your pepper and pretends not to sneeze. You admire his professionalism. Friendly words oil stiff hinges. You ask after the harbor master's elderly uncle, who once taught you a song that made your crew hoard water for a week because they couldn't stop humming. You compliment a clerk's handwriting, which deserves compliments. It curls and flows like water finding a better path. In return, the clerk leans across the table and quietly tells you that the north side of the quay is better tonight. Swell. Fewer young men eager to practice knots on strangers' lines. Cardamom steam unrolls from a low doorway, and a boy appears with cups that might have been made only for hands to feel useful. You sip and feel your insides agree to any reasonable bargain. Warm dust finds the hem of your robe and settles there like a pet. A slow hand drum begins at the back of the market note performance. Just a reminder that hearts like rhythm. You guide your crew through the first exchanges. A stack of hides goes one direction, followed by a coil of rope that once belonged to a boat with less patience. In return, a basket of small glass bottles twitches in straw and clinks like tiny bells, greens and blues, small as birds. A bundle of cotton cloth moves from a shadow into brighter light and seems to whiten as it does, as if cloth enjoys being admired. Harbor gossip seasons the air. A trader swears that beyond the headland pepper is growing extra spicy this year because the soil was angry. You smile and ask, gently, how soil expresses anger. He answers with a shrug, and a shrug is often the end of a good story. Another confides that a ship out of the north paid double fees because their captain tried to read the rules upside down. You promise to read yours right side up today, and perhaps to bring a gift of ink next time. A boy and a gull engage in a philosophical debate. Over a piece of flatbread, the boy argues with speed. The gull argues with wings. The bread makes its decision and disappears. You applaud silently because fair outcomes should always be celebrated. You accompany the official to your hold for a peek. The way hosts lift a cooking lid, just enough to prove generosity. He checks jars with the lazy competence of someone who has seen every jar shape the world can invent. He taps a tusk lightly and listens. You respect that he cares for the sound of honest material. He traces his finger over your tally marks and nods when they match his thoughts. Not once does he ask for more than is on the board. You thank him for being the kind of official whose mother can be proud at dinner. A handful of small coins changes pockets with the soft cluck of a hen contented. You receive a token in return: carved wood, a palm's width, painted with a sign that means you've paid your dues today and may breathe without glancing over your shoulder. Practical magic. You make time for a tiny purchase of your own. A clay jar etched with little waves around its belly. The seller says it keeps water cooler than patience, and while you doubt the measurement, you enjoy the poetry. You take a second jar for me, brat, because cooks deserve gifts, and because hot afternoons are democracy, and everyone votes for cool water. In Asilis. On another voyage, the same patterns will play in a smaller key. The rocks, their crowd closer, and the market leans into the shade. The incense feels sharper, the pottery darker, the dates a touch drier, but the scales still click, the harbor still hums, and the fees and customs still draw their neat lines between welcome and welcome back soon. Ports are cousins. They share the family habit of measuring fairness out loud. You step back into the sun and feel it stretch your shadow long, like a flag laid down to rest. Kidane supervises the last of the unloading with that quiet wrist language of he's here there. lift, breathe. Hassan stands with the pilot, looking at the sky in the way gardeners look at soil, imagining what it might do tomorrow. Both men carried the day lightly. Later, when the market grows a rind of cooler air, and the drum gives way to the softer percussion of wooden sandals, you walk the edge of the quay to greet the sea again. The ropes on your ship look relaxed. The hull looks pleased, and the gull that defeated the boy earlier now preens like a citizen with a window seat. You promise the rudder tea tomorrow because it worked last time and because rituals are just happy habits with costumes. Evening gentles. You into a small room above the harbor with a lamp that makes a circle of gold on the table. The breeze lifts the curtain like a friend who refuses to knock. You unroll your ledger and let the quill find its lane. Docking fee paid. Customs noted. Stamped. Hides exchanged for cloth and glass. Pepper counted. Sniffs endured. Jar for me, brat. Very good. Jar for you. Potentially cooler than patients investigate. You write names in the margin because names are bridges. The clerk with the waterfall handwriting. The harbor master with the uncle who loves songs. The pottery seller who laughs like pebbles in a jar. You add a little sketch of the carved token, in case later you need to remember what fairness looked like today. The room settles. The harbor's murmur comes through the window in a thinner thread now, embroidered with a last stray drum beat, and the clack of a late scale deciding one more trade. You close the ledger with the soft thump of something accomplished, but not finished, never finished. Because the sea likes a sequel, you blow out the lamp, the smoke writing one final word you can't read but can feel. And you let the night fold around you like cloth fresh from cool water. Tomorrow, more greetings. Tonight, the contented weight of a day that sat level on the scales. You lean on the window ledge and let your gaze slip past the quay, past the market roofs, past the pale ridges, until the day in your mind takes the inland road. You don't have to leave the harbor to follow it. The road walks to you if you stand still long enough. First a ribbon of dust, then a bell, then the patient swing of long necks and longer legs. Camels stepping like sleepy metronomes, tick-tock, tick-tock, measuring distance the way a lullaby measures time. The trail rises into the dry valleys where incense trees clutch the slopes like careful hands. They are not tall, not grand, but stubborn and generous in the way desert things must be. Their bark is pale and a little papery. Their leaves, small and serious. A cutter scores the bark with a tool no more special than a thoughtful knife just. A shallow line in the tree answers slowly. Sap beads at the wound and gathers itself into a tear. At first it is clear as a held breath. Then, with sun and patience, it clouds to milky white or amber gold. Each drop deciding what it wants to be when it grows up. You crouch in the mine's sand and watch the tears harden. The ground smells faintly of lemon and honey and something that feels like sacred rooms. The people who tend the trees move with the quiet focus of bakers, doing the same small acts over and over until they add up to the smell of festivals. They come back in a few days to lift the dried tears with nimble fingers and let them clatter into baskets tiny crystal pebbles that pretend to be humble. Farther along, myrrh trees offer their darker, ruddier sorrow tears that look like small sunsets and smell rounder, more earthly. The two resins sit in neighboring bowls at a roadside shelter, and you play a private game. Frankincense is sunrise. Myrrh is the hour after. You know which temple wants which household prefers the bright smoke or the deeper one, which healer asks for a pinch to mix with oil when someone's chest feels like a locked door. It's easy to remember because your own breath seems to shift with the sense. Lighter, then slower, then very sure of itself. The first gathering happens. In simple courtyards, baskets become heaps. Heaps become piles. Piles become decisions. The resin is sorted by color and size, pale tears to one side, amber to another, darker to a third, like a friendly argument where everyone agrees to stand with their cousins. A clerk with a reed pen makes dots that add up to a fair number. A woman hums as she ties the mouths of sacks. A child dares the breeze to steal a grain and loses. Laughing dot, then the roadwork begins. Not the loud kind, the enduring kind. Camels kneel and grunt and complain in a style that says they're very good at this, and also, please note our suffering. Loads are balanced in woven panniers, resin to the left, resin to the right, a little bounce while the ropes settle. Then, A sigh that means, fine, I suppose. A lead walker sets the beat with a stick, and a tune no one exactly knows, and the caravan stretches itself into a long, swaying thought that the desert is pleased to finish. You have walked with them enough times to know their rhythm. Morning is pearl gray and reasonable. Midday is white fire and short sentences. Afternoon trades heat for wind, and conversation with the sky returns. Wells appear like promises kept, stone rings with cool shadows and a rumor of frogs deep below. At each stop, resin sacks are checked and retied, and a few tears of frankincense melt on a coal for good mood and good flies. The smoke curls upward, as if it remembers the way without being told. At a caravanserai, a courtyard, shade, a gate that closes with satisfaction, the little economy of the trail unfolds. A scribbler sits cross-legged with a board and writes numbers no wind can lift. A pot of tea works all morning, never fully emptied, refilled with water and kindness, and a spoon of honey when someone looks tired enough to trip over their own shadow. You negotiate better after honeyed tea. Everyone does. It is a known fact, like gravity and the price of dates. People pay road fees here, and there are small tolls to pass a well, a bridge, a stretch of track that stubborn sand likes to swallow. You explain it to new hands in the easiest words. We thank the keepers for the path. They thank us for not making trouble. Sometimes the fee is coin. Sometimes it's a pinch of resin or a promise of news. A good story pays well on the road. When wind rises, it lifts the valley's voice into your ears, sound hissing like soft rain, camel pads whispering, bells making a conversation that never needs to stop. The caravan moves as if the desert were a big kitchen, and the camels were the sensible cooks who alone know where the bowls live. At night, a small brazier turns that kitchen into a chapel. Someone breaks a bit of resin and lets it soften on the coal. The smoke sits on cheeks and hair, remembering everything it has perfumed. Shrines at dawn, houses at supper. The quiet hour after someone important has been buried, and words have given way to thought. The road bends toward towns that are both workrooms and crossroads. There, resin becomes paperwork and promise. Weights are simple stones with marks everyone trusts. Measures are baskets everyone knows. A scribe writes a receipt with a flourish that could be a bird. And now your sacks are no longer just sacks. They are tickets to the coast. Men from farther valleys arrive with goatskins of water. Women with bracelets like rain bring news that the northern pass is grumpy this month. Grumpiness is carefully noted. The last stretch to the coast goes down, always down, like a gesture of offering. Hills relax into tufts of tough grass. The smell tilts from hot stone towards salt. Palms appear with the relief of a sip of water tasted in your head before it touches your tongue. And then, as naturally as a thought, finishing its sentence, the sea opens. Blue and flat as a listening ear, Con waits there, a harbor like a laid-out hand. Warehouses blink in the light. Ropes drape from beams like old smiles. Weighing tables stand ready, their balance arms polished by decisions. The caravan sighs and kneels, and becomes piles again, piles that climb as heads count and nod. You step in with your own calm and your own stones and your habit of letting everyone see. Resin moves from dust to deck with that special thump that says, "We will travel now as if meant to." From here the map is a string of familiar beads. Resin crosses the short sea to ports like Musa, where we just stood. It boards ships like yours that sniff thoughtfully at weather and then stretch for India, or north for temples along the Nile. The cargo slips into city streets with tall walls, into courtyards with fountains, into rooms where priests lay a pinch on a coal and measure prayers by how the smoke rises. In royal courts, resin is not just perfume, it's punctuation. A sentence about victory ends with a curl of bright smoke. A sentence about peace begins with the same. In homes, a sliver on the brazier says, "The guests are welcome, and the linen will keep the smell of welcome until laundry day lies." In markets, apothecaries lift a grain into oil and bottle a comfort for aching chests and stubborn coughs. You tell all this to yourself as a way of remembering why the sacks are worth the careful fingers and the long road and the many small cups of tea. Grading happens. Once more before the sea swallow, your eye has learned the trick. The palest tears fetch the best price for certain temples that prefer white smoke. The slightly darker ones go to households that want warmth more than brightness. The sticky red sweet bits of myrrh find buyers who speak softly and ask for 2 jars for medicine. Which is true and also not the whole song. You keep the categories simple so sleep can keep its arms around you while you work. Light, medium, deep. You add a 4th for the handful you like best because they smell like mornings you wish would repeat. Men with long poles walk the sacks from shade to ship. 2 and 2, a procession with the dignity of something important practiced often. You watch a grain fall and bounce and shine and finally decide to stay on land. You wonder where it will end up, stuck in a sandal, pressed into a crack in a step, found next week by a child who will hold it up and ask if this is treasure. You agree, from a distance, that it is. At the quay, Kadain stands with a list that behaves itself. Hassan tastes the air as he does and says the wind is in a generous mood but prefers flattery. You flatter it by promising to reef early if it grows excited. Men at the scale table compare your stones and theirs, and, finding the marks the same, smile the smile of symmetry. Seals find their papers. Papers find their box. Boxes find their corners. Corners find the quiet they like. You step aboard and duck into the hold, where a new fragrance settles itself among pepper, cloth, and the wooden memory of wine. It is not loud, it is everywhere. The sacks make a tidy wall, soft to the hand, cool to the mind. You lay your palm on them and think of the groves, the knife, the tear, the pause, the harvest stand. You whisper a promise out of habit, to deliver, to keep dry, to light a pinch at the right moments. When courage asks for assent, it remembers. From childhood. Above, the day lets go of its bright edge and begins to speak in purples and golds. You return to the deck and lean on the rail. The inland road you traveled in, your thoughts folds itself away like a map with no sharp angles. A rider brings the last note from the caravan, thanks, a joke. News of a baby whose name smells like milk, and you tuck the word into your ledger for the pleasure of seeing it later. The harbor shifts into evening. Gulls retire to their committees. Brazier smoke learns to glow. The drum at the far stall slows and softens like a heartbeat deciding to dream. You feel the ship accept the resin's weight, a new balance, a new story in its belly. Lines hum under the last, gentle strain of tying. Down lanterns think about being useful. You think about honeyed tea, which has made you a better negotiator than you truly deserve. On the quay, a brazier releases a final curl of frankincense, and it climbs into the dusk like a scribe's most careful flourish. Somewhere a camel coughs in the dignified way of elders. Somewhere a child laughs at the size of the moon. You let the scents and sounds stack softly in your chest until they feel like a cushion. When you finally close the hatch and make the last chalk mark resin aboard, snug and labeled, you can almost hear the long road exhale through the sacks. You stand a moment longer at the rail, listening to the sea make room in its pocket for your ship. Then you turn toward the companionway, toward the lamp's small circle and the ledger's kind lines, while outside the wind rehearses the lullaby. It will sing you tomorrow when the bow points. Seaward again. You lean with the hull's new weight and feel the ship's center settle, quiet and sure. Lines come in hand over hand. The sail opens its shoulder, and the shore begins to unthread itself behind you, like a story that has agreed to pause. The Arabian coastline softens into a long honey-colored ribbon, and then into a suggestion, and you step into the open run where the sea forgets to blink, and the sky remembers it is enormous. The wind takes your back like a patient friend walking the same direction. You don't argue with a friend like that. You keep one palm in the air for a last taste, as if sampling soup again, still ready, still warm, still saying east. The monsoon. Here isn't a tantrum, it's a hallway. Long, straight, a draft that moves the same way day after gentle day. You walk down that hallway with your mast for a spine and your sail for a wide listening ear. The canvas swells, then relaxes, then swells again, like breathing during a good nap. Your tiller hand doesn't grip, it converses. The hull hums with the easy grammar of distance. Forward, forward, forward. Days at sea turn into a calm arithmetic. You do without paper. You measure a morning by the number of cups passed along the rail, an afternoon by how many repairs move from soon to done, an evening by the width of light poured across the deck. You know you're making east, not because you pull on complicated words, but because the sun gets out of bed to your left and goes to sleep to your right, and your wake scribbles a straight sentence behind you that the sea edits only with kindness. At night the sky throws the lid off itself. Stars appear in so many patient scatterings your eyes don't know where to be generous first. You pack the darkness with names or with silence, it works, either way. Sometimes a spray of phosphorescence answers your hull like city lights turned upside down. The wake becomes a wide chalk mark, your bow a bright question mark. Dolphins ride fast, laughing signatures beside you, their backs flicking fire. You lean over and whisper, and the sea answers in green sparks, as if your voice had become visible for a moment and enjoyed the attention. The ship learns its long stride. Ropes knock softly now and then on wood, a distant, reassuring metronome. The breeze keeps its side of the bargain steady. Even so your sail can keep its soft lantern shape. Me brought bruised water with spice and a sting of sweet. You cradle the cup and feel your spine agree to the day's length. She swears a crushed cardamom pod makes the horizon come closer by a finger's width. You do not see it on the map, but your bones don't argue. Between sips and small tasks, the crew shares the kind of stories that have worn smooth from retelling. Someone remembers a storm that growled but never bit. Someone else remembers a fish so big it contained all the other fish inside its rumor. You contribute a tale in which your rudder steered better after a polite cup of tea, and the boat, utterly composed, does nothing to contradict you. Laughter moves in low waves along the deck, the sort that never disturbs the wind's concentration. When a seam begs attention, you give it. Cadane warms a little pitch until it turns glossy and agreeable, threads it with a brush into the place where plank meets plank and says, "There, be friends," in a tone that has repaired more than wood. Hassan mends a net just because busy. Hands keep luck from growing bored. You tie a fresh whipping on a line that has begun to dream of fraying. Each small fix feels like adjusting a blanket over a sleeping house. You keep an eye on cloud shapes, the way shepherds watch sheep. Thin mares high and distant. No hurry. A small grey curtain to the south. A squall rehearsing its lines. If the curtain wanders closer, you simply tuck a fold into the thing. But you don't need the word and. The ship thanks you by becoming more, not less, herself. The monsoon is broad-backed, but you treat it with the courtesy you'd give a strong horse. Rain's light, voice calm, no sudden plans. You explain the wind's helpful angle to the youngest hand, without borrowing trouble from geometry. It's not right behind us, you say, it's just over your shoulder. A push and a suggestion at once. We give the cloth to that push, and the boat walks easy. He nods, then leans the same way the sail leans, as if sympathy could add a fraction to your pace. It probably can. Midday rinses the color from everything but the sea's blue, which holds its ground like a rumor that turned out to be true. Flying fish take to the air in brief, glittering sentences, as if the ocean is writing notes to itself, and then remembering it doesn't have pockets. A turtle lifts a thoughtful face, calculates whether you're interesting, and chooses not to be impressed. You accept the review. The ship's shadow slides under you like a dark, loyal dog. You watch it thicken and thin with the swell, and think about the land that sent you, and the land that waits. You are equidistant for a while. Exactly between two soups, you know the taste of two kinds of dust. Your sandals, remember. It's a balance you wish you could bottle and set on a shelf for those afternoons when coin and promise wobble on the scale. Meal bells don't exist out here, but there's an hour when lentils always smell ready and flatbread always decides to blister perfectly. Pepper gets pinched with a hush because so much of it now lives below deck like treasure that sneezes. You sit in the shade of the sail and make a ceremony of simple food. The sea appreciates such honesty. It tilts the deck a degree kinder while you chew. Sometimes the afternoon leans into a low, coppery light that puts a quiet on everyone. Lines hum, the tiller purrs in your palm, and the only tasks left are unhurried. Sharpening a blade that was already sharp. Counting water with the respect good water deserves. Looking at the horizon to make sure it knows you are looking back. You take out your cord with knots, the kind of memory that doesn't care who remembers it, and let it coil and uncoil in your lap. Distance can be a number, but out here it's mostly a feeling that rises and falls with your breath. When the night comes early, as it sometimes chooses to, The sea lights itself with the tiniest lanterns. Your bow writes a bright V. Your wake draws a long, glowing ladder you could climb if you were made of moon. The crew grows gentle in the face of that much quiet. Voices drop. Footsteps learn to step around sleep. Watch changes pass like the softest relay. You run a fingertip along the rail, and it comes away wet and salt-bright. And you consider this proof that the world is paying attention. The patient math of days continues. A tiny chip of wood tossed at the bow takes a certain list of heartbeats to slip past the sternhess and counts, and hums and tells you, without fuss, whether you are keeping the promise you made to yourself about pace. You don't write the number, you write the feeling. Good, almost good. Check the sheet, pour tea for the rudder. The margin fills with tiny birds and waves that mean more to you than numerals ever did. You sleep in winks and wake in wider blinks. None of it a struggle. The sea is a mother rocking a big crib, and every creak is another verse. When rain sidles by in a shy grey curtain, it never stays rude. It brushes your shoulders, rinses the salt from your hair, and drifts off with a whispering apology. You thank it anyway because it saves you from finding a bucket. Days stack and soften. You measure them by stories finished, and then retold, by a tear mended in a sleeve, by a song that grows a second verse because someone misremembered the first and improved it. The boat collects these things and stores them in the same place. It keeps spare pegs and good luck. Your own mind does the same. You promise, as you always do, to remember the taste of the sky on this particular morning. The way the line's shadow cut the deck like a sundial that believed in you personally. Then, almost without effort, the sea begins to give you small clues that you are nearing another shore. A twig you couldn't name. A cluster of pale foam with a different smell. The wind brings a wet green note, like leaves after rain, and you inhale it twice to make sure you didn't imagine it. Birds arrive with more purpose, no longer wanderers, but commuters. They come from a direction that makes your heart guess correctly. Hassan points to the low, thunderhead clouds inland. Though you can't see the land, you can see its weather standing on tiptoe. The swell changes its handwriting. Longer, lazier, as if it has been practicing on beaches. The water shifts from deep lapis to a softer, river-remembering blue. You ease the sail a fraction. The cloth answers with a pleased belly. You say, "For no reason at all." Soon, and the boat tilts its ear as if it heard you. On the final evening stretch, the sun drinks half the sky and leaves the rest for you. The air smells like something growing and something cooking at the same times. Smoke, wet soil, palm, and a spice that makes your tongue search for a word it will not find until tomorrow in a market stall. You lace the tiller with your fingers, like an old handshake, and let the wind finish its sentence. The horizon thickens. Dark threads appear where land gathers itself. One thread becomes a line of trees. The line of trees becomes a row of masts and house roofs hiding in green. Between them, a river mouth opens like a door left ajar, and you swear you can see the promise of lamps already deciding to be lit. You call for the crew with nothing more than a look, and they bring the day's chores to a close the way people close a good book, carefully, fondly, without slamming. Lines are coiled in circles that look like friendly suns. The galley lid settles with a small, satisfied clack. Kadain checks the forward lashings, as if gratitude were a knot. Hassan rolls his star bag with the tenderness of someone tucking in. A child. Wind keeps its hand on your back. A final, generous push along the long hallway it promised you at the start. You run the last inches of your palm along the rail and gather up every shine of salt your fingers can carry. The monsoon will breathe you the rest of the way, eastward, toward a palm-lined shore where river and sea take turns saying welcome, and with the sky the color of warm copper and the water writing a soft road under your keel, you guide the bow toward that green edge where India waits, patient, bright, and already smelling faintly of pepper and rain. The river opens its palm, and you place your ship gently in it, easing the sail until the canvas settles like a satisfied chest. The sea's long sentence softens into a comma here. The water slows and remembers how to meander. Mangroves lean in with gossip, and palms line up like tall, friendly scribes, writing shade onto the banks. A barge slides past with the indifference of a cat, low and broad, pushing a lazy crease across the surface. The air changes flavor, wet leaf, warm soil, a pepper prickle that seems to tap your nose with one finger. You nudge the tiller and let the current do most of the thinking. Muziris takes shape from green and mist, roofs tucked among trees, jetty posts like dark pencils, small boats crossing and recrossing the channel with practiced politeness. A pilot comes out in a canoe hardly wider than his grin. He makes 2 easy strokes, glances at your mast as if greeting an old friend, and lifts his paddle for you to follow. The river's slow heartbeat drums under the hull. When you draw alongside, the first thing your eyes choose is the pepper. Sacks upon sacks, drowsy as elephants after a bath, leaning into one another in that companionable way heavy things prefer. A clerk pokes a sack with a stick, and the grains answer with a soft hiss, like rain rehearsing. The smell is serious, warm, sharp, almost exciting. Pepper has that little habit of making the ordinary wake up. It's not magic, it just knows how to make a tongue pay attention. Add a pinch to stew, and the whole table sits up straighter. You step ashore and the ground feels springy with all the arrivals and departures it has learned. Vendors call, but not loudly. The river teaches people to speak in currents. A woman passes with a basket of green bananas tucked in leaves. A boy balances a tray of clay cups that steam with cardamom and milk. Farther in, someone tests a drum. With the heel of a hand one, 2 and lets the rhythm drift away. A temple bell in the distance drops a silver coin of sound into the morning, and the ripples come all the way to your ankles. Bead sellers set out their trays in the sun, so the glass can show off. Blues like river shade, reds like pomegranate seeds, tiny whites like the idea of milk. You let a handful roll into your palm and they sound like a polite rain. A maker explains, with gentle pride, how sand and ash become melt, and melt becomes thread, and thread becomes beads as the rod twirls and breathes. You don't need the furnace words to follow. You see the motion in his hands, and your fingers nod along. A pepper broker waves amiably with a scale in his other hand. Your nose itches immediately, because noses have a sense of humor. He pretends not to notice. You pretend you always look teary-eyed when you're happy. Pepper is precious here for simple reasons. You can tell even while sleepy. It keeps well. It travels light for its value. And a little does a lot. Kings like it because cooks like it, because soldiers like it, because everybody with a bowl likes the way food stops being shy. In far-off kitchens, a few grains stand in for whole gardens. You take the buyer's path, which is mostly walking slowly, and listening. On your left, barges bump shoulders, full of cargo from inland pepper, yes, but also rice in quiet heaps. Coconut fiber ropes coiled like sleeping snakes. Timber that smells like rain held in wood. On your right, warehouses blink in the shade and hawkers offer you betel leaf with lime, a small green pause that the locals say keeps conversation cheerful. You keep conversation cheerful with a cup of sweet tea, because you negotiate better after dessert. A customs officer approaches with the whitened fingernails of a man who owns chalk. He checks your vessel's name, your cargo marks, and your face. You offer the ledger, and that face everyone uses when they want to look honest, and also are. He talks you through rules designed to be understood after a long sail. A little for docking space on the jetty is a kind of floor you rent. A pinch for what goes ashore, pepper mostly. Beads perhaps. Cloth if you're trading the other direction. A seal that proves your gratitude. The rates are posted in both script and gesture. Fingers raised and nod. The weight of a standard jar lifted to say like this much. You appreciate the clarity. You like any system that survives a hot afternoon. River, ports like this one are good at being doors. Inland, pepper vines climb the trees of the hills with quiet determination. Farmers' families really tend the vines, picking the spikes when the berries have the right stubborn green. The spikes dry, the berries darken, and the bags begin. Their journey, cart to creek, creek to river, river to barges like the ones nudging the quay right now. Everything funnels gently toward the sea in stages that make sense when you say them slowly. From here, the world widens again. Ships like yours carry the little black worlds away, in sacks that breathe and lists that do not. A broker tilts a bowl of pepper into your hand and invites you to feel its weight. It's heavier than it looks, like a pocket full of secrets. He tells you the rate with a shrug. That means it's firm but not carved into rock. You try your best bargaining, sneeze delicate, considerate, entirely sincere, and he performs the ancient art of not noticing. While noticing, you both smile because it's pleasant to be predictable. Then you settle into that comfortable middle where both parties can eat well tonight, and also tomorrow. The scales clack. Your stones meet his stones with the little kiss of agreement. Someone brings seal wax, someone else warms it above a lamp. Your ring presses a memory into it. His sign does the same. Two promises cool at the same time, and they both look official enough to make even the gulls nod. You pick your way toward the bead. Tables again because the light there is flattering. A girl with quick hands strings blue white, until the strand catches the day and refuses to give it back. Traders from far cities will buy these, and then people in farther cities you will never see will wear them near skin, and the river's slow heartbeat will end up on a neck half a world away. It's a thought you fold and keep in your pocket for later. Back at the pepper stacks, men move the sleepy elephant sacks in pairs, with a careful push of hips and the kind of counting that happens under the breath. The courtyard smells like a lesson: pepper, damp mat, the faint sweetness of coconut smoke, a hint of fish drying somewhere patient. A vendor's song threads the air and catches on the rigging of smaller boats, and you're not sure if it's a prayer or a price list. Maybe it's both. You let yourself be ushered to a shaded bench and a clay cup of frothy sweet milk that wants to be dessert. You ask simple questions because they get simple truths. How far? A day up the backwaters to this village. 2 to that one. How wet? This seasoned kinder than last. How many? Enough to make the clerk's hand tired by noon. A boy sketches a map in spilled tea with a finger. Coils and bends of the river. Dots for pepper gardens. A long line for the track over the low ridge. Somewhere in that doodle is the reason your ship exists. The temple bell speaks again, closer, this time, and a breeze brings a pale thread of smoke that smells like ghee and something sweet. You stand, stretch, and walk the quay with Kidane, who has already charmed a dockman into discussing not preferences like scholars. Hassan has the sky in his peripheral vision, as usual, reading the river wind's mood as if it were a friend, deciding between two good meals. Mibrot, naturally, has made 3 acquaintances and traded for a small jar of pickled mango that could raise spirits in a cave. You begin the gentle round of moving goods. Some pepper stays old and stacked in a warehouse that knows how to breathe. Some pepper comes bought and carried in because it's your job to move flavor east and west like a thoughtful tide. A few strings of beads tuck into your chest because sailors have sisters and friends and people who prefer bright stories too, dark ones. In a corner, a jar of toddy glints with its own opinion about afternoon. You leave it to others because your ledger has better jokes. Someone brings out a tray of pale river pearls, irregular and honest, each one with the soft gleam of a cloudy dawn. You choose to not quite matching pearls for reasons that make sense only to you. Later, you will forget the reason and remember the river instead, which is the sort of trade memory loves to make. The day tilts. Light turns the color of wet brass. Barges head homeward like cows choosing evening. The market lowers its voice by a step. Rain thinks about the idea of rain and then decides to write a brief note. Soft drops that tick the pepper sacks like curious fingers. Coil ropes darken and shine. The mud takes on that wide, generous smell that tells all tired people to keep walking because shelter is very near. You return to the wharf for one last tidy conversation. The tallyman, the scale, the final seal. He adds your name to a long line of names and you feel briefly like a bead on a strand you did not know you wore. You tip your head to the clerk with the waterfall handwriting and he waves the brush like a tiny flag. Then you and your day drift toward the warehouse. You've rented a cool rectangle of shade with a roof that frowns at rain on your behalf. Inside, Pepper breathes in the dark like a low fire. Cloth stacks quietly. Beads rest with the dignity of small, important things. You set a lamp where it will make a gentle circle. Open the ledger where it will not try to fly. And let the quill remember what numbers look like when they are content. You write the last easy lines. Pepper received. Pepper promised. Beads exchanged. Milk excellent, and close the book on air that smells of pepper and rain. The room's cool breath folds over you like a clean sheet, and outside Muziris keeps its slow heartbeat, patient as the river that taught it how. The courtyard is already cooler than the street, washed in that leafy shade that makes numbers friendlier. You step under the lintel, and the sound changes. Outside noise softens. Inside, a small fountain practices its looping sentence. Earthen jars rest along the wall like sleeping moons. A servant sets a brass tray between cushions and slides cups. In a neat line, steam carrying cardamom, and a polite suggestion to sit. You do. The cushion sighs. Breath in, breath out. You let the place teach your shoulders how to behave. Your host arrives with the measured.com of someone who has already decided to enjoy this conversation. His robe is the color of unripe mango. His smile is the color of permission. You rise. The small amount that says hello without making the cushion feel rejected. Press your fingers together in greeting, and then mirror the gesture he offers, palm near heart. A tiny bow. Greet first, trade later. It's an old rule that still feels new every time the interpreter takes his place as comfortably as a bridge over water. He's the kind of person who hears two languages and pours them into one cup without spilling. You speak a sentence in your own tongue. He turns it gently so it lands in your host's. Your host answers. The bridge flows back. The miracle is not the vocabulary. It's the temperature. A good interpreter carries tone across, keeps your humor warm, your respect visible, your hesitations soft. You thank him with glances. Bridges appreciate being noticed. There's a script to the first sips. You talk about safe things, weather, the river's mood, how the pepper dust made everyone sneeze with excellent manners at the quay. He tells a story about a monkey stealing figs. You counter with a gull stealing bread. Everyone agrees that animals are very loyal to their own economics. You both laugh, the kind of laugh that oils stiff hinges. The fountain whispers. Leaves accept a tiny rain, as if the day needed a little percussion. When it's time to let numbers sniff the air, you do it the quiet way. You bring out the sample bags, small cloth pouches tied with habit. You lay them on the low table and untie them like revealing small constellations. Pepper first, black grains, wrinkled and sure of themselves, rolling into a shallow dish. Beads, next, a string of blues and whites that catch the courtyard light and refuse to return it. A twist of cotton, soft as a secret. You place each thing where the eye can rest. Your host nods as he looks, not to hurry you, but to show he is on the same page of the book. Hand signs do half the work without taking credit. You show weight with a palm lowered, quality with a pinch raised to the nose, price with fingers that open and close like a friendly abacus. He counters with the tilt of a head that says maybe, the circle of a thumb and forefinger that says exactly, the brief press of a flat hand to the table that says let's keep this part firm. The interpreter gives each gesture its voice, but the gestures were already saying a lot. You practice the art of the pause. It's almost a craft. Let a sentence sit like a jar settling into straw. Don't crowd it with the next thought. You sip, look at the leaves, listen to the fountain counting to 3 and back again. Silence here doesn't mean no. It means ripening. In the quiet, your host adjusts the beads on the cloth, as if they were thinking. In the same quiet, you adjust the grain of pepper with a fingertip and pretend you did not add 1 or subtract 1 because you didn't. You simply gave the pepper time to remember its best self. Everyone has a favorite bargaining myth, and they appear on schedule like birds at dusk. Your host swears that a buyer who sneezes exactly twice has brought hidden coin. 2 sneezes are the jingle. You sneeze once, very delicately, because pepper is persuasive. He looks delighted and says perhaps, you have half-hidden coin. You counter with the legend that if you touch wood, then cloth, then your left ear, the final number will please both grandmothers. He touches wood, then cloth, then his right ear by mistake, and the interpreter refuses to correct him because he respects comedy. The first numbers arrive like polite guests. You present yours in words and in the little dance of hands. He listens, sips, and speaks his, which are taller by a head and wearing new sandals. The interpreter places them between you like 2 cousins asked to share a stool. You don't wrestle. You rearrange your fingers, suggest a smaller sandal. His suggests a better stool. You keep your face like water, easy to see through. He keeps his like shade, easy on the eyes. While the math breathes, practicalities step in. Weights and measures are your neutral friends, and you invite them. The standard jar appears, the one everyone agrees is a jar. Even on hot days when jars feel philosophical, the knotted cord comes out hand over hand, the knots landing like soft punctuation on the table. A small balance sits between you, its arms polished by decisions. You place pepper in one pan, stones in the other, and let the beam find level. The pointer settles like a bird that has just chosen a branch. No one argues with a bird that's certain. You both smile at how boring fairness looks, and how much you like it that way. The interpreter explains a clause that would confuse a breeze. Delivery in 2 parts, one now, one after the next rain. He turns your plain words into plain words on paper. The scribe's brush makes a friendly scratching sound, and the ink dries. While you talk about roads, how the track over the low ridge has become polite again since the last flood. How the bargemen prefer the left channel now that a sandbar learned to move. You compare notes on porters with good backs and good songs. Logistical gossip is the sweetest kind. You pass the sample bags to the host again and watch him host them back. Because this is part of the ceremony, the goods moving between palms, learning the temperature of the deal. He pinches a grain of pepper and presses it lightly to his tongue, nodding at its courage. You lift a bead to your eye and admire the bubble caught in its middle like a moon inside a pond. You both make the appreciative sounds of people who enjoy exact, small things. You feel the day lean toward a decision the way a plant leans toward a window. The final number arrives almost of its own accord, in that tone of voice people use when they know they landed in the shared center. You say it once, he repeats it once. The interpreter nods as if stamping the air. Seals want their turn. Wax warms above a lamp until it looks like honey that forgot about bees. The scribe drips a neat circle onto the contract's bottom corner. You pressed your ring in your ship's small sign. He presses his arm emblem with a leaf. That means his grandfather liked gardens. To marks cool side by side, and the paper feels heavier in your hand for the companionship. Payment in part is counted with a quiet dignity that makes coins behave. A little stack grows on the tray steady, no drama. The remainder will meet you at the warehouse door after the porters finish, proving that pepper is not light after all. Your host reaches under the table and brings out a cloth package, advances for the beads you admired more than you meant to. You accept it with the air of someone accepting responsibility for future compliments. Because every good agreement likes a witness, you invite a small sweetness, 2 dates each, slipped from a bowl that must have walked here on its own, while everyone pretended not to notice. You raise the cup again, sip, and let a new silence settle. Not the ripening kind, the fruit kind. This one tastes like completion. Beyond the wall, distant chatter lifts like steam, pleased with itself. Translators earn their salary in the last 5 minutes. The interpreter coaxes all your plain words into a plain contract, then reads it back with the cadence of a lullaby. The what, the how much, the when, the where, the in fair weather or after 3 days if the river sulks. He keeps the music of it intact. You sign with the same hand you used to steer. Your host anchors the page with his leaf again. The scribe sands the ink and blows gently, the most dignified breeze in the world. You practice live-taking with the respect of scholars. Hands rise, touch, lower. You trade small promises that fit in pockets. A jar of pickled mango for your cook. A length of coir rope for your first mate who admires other people's knots. Your host offers the oldest phrase in trade, the one that never loses its sheen. Next time, you must come to my house. You answer with the second oldest. If I do not, the river will scold me. On your way out, you pause under the arch, where rain dots a small rectangle of dust, like a careful scribe. The courtyard has learned your names, and you have learned its pace. You tuck the sealed paper into your leather sleeve, and feel the comforting tug of its waiter, promise made tidy. The interpreter, now just a man with a good walk, smiles a private smile that says bridges enjoy sunsets to dot back in the street. The air smells rinsed and bright. The fountain's voice follows you to the gate, and the distant chatter turns into vendor calls, brave enough to start again. You step into the lane with numbers settled, palms warmed, and the quiet pride of a deal that never raised its voice. The port will have its own rhythm waiting, the scrape of crates, the gentle scold of ropes, the sweet complaint of pepper sacks being persuaded to move. and somewhere in that rhythm, a kitchen is already boiling water for the return hospitality your host promised. A cup with your name curling in its steam. You let the sealed contract ride, easy in your sleeve, and let the street's rinsed air slow your steps. The sky has tucked away its sharp blue and left a gray softness that invites patience. A thin drizzle sets its own small tempo on the eaves and the river. Carts roll without hurry, palms shine, and every footprint fills with a momentary mirror. You breathe coconut, wet earth, and the warm